Washington, D.C., a tense silence hung over the House of Representatives chamber. The congressional session had begun as a routine committee meeting, but when White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt approached the microphone and uttered a single sentence, the entire room froze. The expression on the face of Democratic rising star Jasmine Crockett changed. The committee chairman tried to cut off the microphone, but it was too late. That one sentence had turned into a moment that would reverberate through American politics for a long time. It was June 14, 2025, and the House Oversight Committee was holding what was supposed to be a standard hearing on government transparency. The committee room was packed with representatives, staffers, journalists, and C-SPAN cameras capturing every moment for the American public. Representative Jasmine Crockett, the firebrand Democrat from Texas, who had risen to prominence with her viral confrontations during committee hearings, was in her element. For the past 20 minutes, she had been grilling Deputy Attorney General Michael Thompson about alleged document withholding by the Trump administration. "Mr. Thompson," Crockett said, her voice rising with practiced indignation, "the American people deserve to know why the Trump administration continues to obstruct our investigations. These documents clearly show a pattern of deception that goes all the way to the top." She held up a folder containing what she claimed were internal Department of Justice memos. The red confidential stamp was clearly visible to the cameras. "These memos, which my office has obtained through legitimate channels, reveal that President Trump personally directed your department to withhold critical information from Congress," Crockett continued. "This is not just obstruction, Mr. Thompson. This is a constitutional crisis." The Republican representatives on the committee shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Deputy Attorney General Thompson began to respond, but Crockett wasn't finished. "And where is the accountability?" she pressed on. "Where is Press Secretary Leavitt when these questions need answering? Instead of transparency, all we get are deflections and denials from the White House podium day after day." What Crockett didn't realize was that Caroline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary who had become known for her fierce defense of the Trump administration, was actually in the room. Leavitt had come to observe the hearing, sitting quietly in the back row, taking notes on her tablet. As Crockett mentioned her name, Leavitt looked up. Her expression remained composed, but those sitting near her noticed her blue eyes narrow. Slightly, Crockett continued her monologue, now waving the folder more emphatically. "These documents show clear evidence of coordination between the president's personal attorneys and Department of Justice officials to obstruct congressional oversight. The timestamps and signatures are right here." It was at this moment that Leavitt stood up. The movement caught the attention of several committee members, including Chairman James Wilson. "Mr. Chairman," Leavitt said calmly but firmly, "I request permission to respond to these allegations, as they directly involve the office of the White House Press Secretary." The room fell silent. This was highly unusual. While cabinet officials and other administration representatives regularly testified before congressional committees, they did so after being formally invited. Spontaneous interventions from the audience were not part of standard procedure. Chairman Wilson, a moderate Democrat from Michigan, appeared momentarily confused. He peered over his glasses at Leavitt, then glanced at Crockett, who had stopped mid-sentence and was now staring at the young press secretary. "Ms. Leavitt, this is irregular, but given that Representative Crockett has directly referenced your office, I'll grant you 2 minutes," Wilson said, tapping his gavel lightly. As Leavitt made her way to the witness table, the tension in the room was palpable. Republican representatives straightened in their seats, suddenly alert. Democratic members exchanged concerned glances. Something unexpected was happening, and in Washington, the unexpected was rarely good news for someone. Leavitt took her seat at the witness table, adjusting the microphone with the calm precision that had become her trademark in White House briefings. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a conservative navy blue suit. At 27, she was the youngest White House press secretary in history, yet she carried herself with the confidence of someone twice her age. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice steady. "I appreciate the opportunity to address the committee directly." She turned slightly to face Crockett, their eyes meeting across the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Leavitt delivered the sentence that would send shockwaves through Washington. "Representative Crockett, the documents you're holding, which you claim show presidential obstruction are actually fabricated intelligence created by your own staff and distributed by a foreign disinformation campaign that the FBI has been tracking for the past 3 months. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the usually restless journalists in the press section froze. Crockett's expression shifted from confidence to shock, then to something resembling panic. Chairman Wilson, recovering from his own surprise, leaned into his microphone. Ms. Leavitt, that is an extraordinary claim. Do you have evidence to support this allegation? Leavitt nodded and reached into her briefcase. I do, Mr. Chairman. I have here a classified FBI memorandum, declassified by the President 30 minutes ago specifically for this hearing, that details the disinformation operation and identifies those documents as forgeries created to sow discord in our government. She handed the document to the committee clerk, who delivered it to Chairman Wilson. As he read it, his face grew increasingly grave. Crockett, finding her voice, responded with indignation. This is absurd. These documents came from a whistleblower within the Justice Department. Are you suggesting that my office is involved in a foreign disinformation campaign? That's outrageous and defamatory. Leavitt remained calm. The FBI has traced these exact documents, Representative Crockett. They originated from a server in Eastern Europe, were routed through encrypted channels, and were delivered to your office by someone claiming to be a DOJ whistleblower named Thomas Anderson. There is no Thomas Anderson employed by the Department of Justice. This was a sophisticated operation designed to mislead Congress and the American people. The Republican members of the committee began to murmur among themselves. Some were already reaching for their phones, undoubtedly contacting their communications staff to prepare statements. Crockett's face had drained of color. She looked down at the folder in front of her, then back at Leavitt. I received these from a trusted source. My staff vetted them thoroughly. I'm sure you believed they were authentic, Leavitt replied, her tone softening slightly. That's what makes disinformation so dangerous. It's designed to be believable. But the FBI has confirmed that the timestamps on those documents are impossible. They show edits made on dates when the supposed authors were verifiably out of the country, and the electronic signatures contain coding errors consistent with other forgeries from this same foreign operation. Chairman Wilson, having finished reading the FBI memorandum, cleared his throat. In light of this information, I'm going to call a 30-minute recess. Representative Crockett, I'd like to see you and Ms. Leavitt in my office immediately. The rest of the committee will reconvene at 2:45 p.m. He struck his gavel, but the sound was barely audible over the eruption of voices as journalists rushed from the room to report on what they had just witnessed. As the committee members filed out, the C-SPAN cameras captured one final exchange. Leavitt approached Crockett, who was still seated, staring at the documents in front of her. For what it's worth, Representative, Leavitt said quietly, I believe you were misled, not complicit. The FBI isn't investigating your office only. The source of the forgeries. Crockett looked up, her expression unreadable. Why didn't you just call my office? Why do this in a public hearing? Leavitt's response was measured. We tried, 3 times in the past week. Your chief of staff said you were too busy to take calls from the White House. Sometimes public clarity is necessary. With that, Leavitt turned and walked out, leaving Crockett alone with the fallout of what had just transpired. Outside the hearing room, chaos had erupted. Journalists were broadcasting live from the hallways of the Capitol, describing the dramatic confrontation. Within minutes, Leavitt TV's Crockett and fake documents were trending on Twitter. Video clips of Leavitt's single devastating sentence were being shared millions of times across social media platforms. At the White House, President Trump had been watching the hearing live. According to staffers present, he stood up and applauded when Leavitt delivered her bombshell. That's why she's the best, he reportedly said. 27 years old, and she just ended a conspiracy against my administration with one sentence. Back at the Capitol, Chairman Wilson's office had become the center of a political storm. Inside, Wilson, Crockett, Leavitt, and the committee's ranking Republican member, Congressman James Parker, were reviewing the FBI's findings in detail. The operation appears to have targeted several congressional offices, Leavitt explained, pointing to a section of the report. But Representative Crockett's was the only one that acted on the false information without further verification. Crockett, visibly shaken but still defiant, responded, "My staff did verify these. We checked the DOJ employee directory. We confirmed the document formatting matches internal standards. We did our due diligence." "The directory you checked was a sophisticated fake," Leavitt countered. "It was hosted on a domain that looked identical to the official DOJ site, but with a single character difference that's almost impossible to spot. This wasn't amateur hour, Representative. This was a state-level intelligence operation." "Chairman." Wilson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "The question now is how we proceed. We have a committee hearing that's been compromised by foreign disinformation. We have serious allegations made on the congressional record that are now proven false. And we have a public relations nightmare unfolding in real time." Congressman Parker, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I think the first step is clear. Representative Crockett needs to make a public statement acknowledging that the documents are forgeries and apologizing for the unfounded accusations against the President and the Department of Justice." Crockett bristled. "Apologize? I was misled. I'm a victim here too." "You're a member of Congress," Leavitt said quietly. "You publicly accused the President of the United States of obstruction based on documents you didn't properly verify. That carries consequences, regardless of who misled you." The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, with tensions running high. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Chairman Wilson would make a statement when the committee reconvened, explaining that new information had come to light regarding the documents in question. The FBI would brief the full committee on the foreign disinformation campaign, and Crockett would issue a statement acknowledging that the documents appeared to be forgeries without explicitly apologizing. When the committee reconvened at 2:45 p.m., the hearing room was even more crowded than before. News of the confrontation had spread like wildfire, and every major news network had sent additional reporters to cover the fallout. Chairman Wilson gavelled the session to order and made his prepared statement. "The committee has received credible information from the Federal Bureau of Investigation indicating that documents referenced earlier in today's hearing may have been part of a foreign disinformation campaign. We take this matter extremely seriously, and the committee will be working closely with the appropriate authorities to investigate further." He then recognized Crockett, who had returned to her seat, though noticeably subdued compared to her earlier fiery demeanor. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "In light of the information provided by the FBI, I wish to state for the record that the documents I referenced earlier may not be authentic. If that is indeed the case, I regret any confusion or misrepresentations that may have resulted. It was a carefully worded statement that acknowledged the possibility of forgery without taking full responsibility for failing to verify the document's authenticity. But in the court of public opinion, the damage was already done. As the hearing continued with its originally scheduled agenda, Caroline Leavitt quietly exited the committee room. Her phone was buzzing constantly with messages from White House colleagues, all congratulating her on her poised and devastating response to Crockett's allegations. By evening, the story had dominated news coverage across all major networks. CNN's headline read, "White House Press Secretary Drops Bombshell, Crockett's Evidence Part of Foreign Disinformation Campaign." Fox News was more direct. "Leavitt destroys Crockett with one sentence, exposes fake documents." Political analysts were unanimous in their assessment. Caroline Leavitt had just had her defining moment as White House Press Secretary, and Jasmine Crockett had suffered a blow that would haunt her political career for years to come. The following morning, the Washington Post published a detailed investigation confirming the FBI's findings. The documents were indeed sophisticated forgeries, created as part of a disinformation operation aimed at sowing discord in the American government. The Post stopped short of naming the foreign power believed to be responsible, citing ongoing national security concerns. At the White House press briefing that day, the briefing room was unusually full. Reporters who normally skipped the daily briefings had shown up, eager to see Leavitt in action after her congressional performance. Leavitt, true to form, maintained her professional demeanor. When asked about the confrontation with Crockett, she downplayed the personal aspect. "Yesterday wasn't about Representative Crockett or me," she said. It was about protecting the integrity of our governmental processes from foreign interference. The FBI did excellent work in tracking this disinformation campaign, and I'm just glad the truth came to light before more damage could be done. A reporter from the New York Times pressed further. But you chose to confront Representative Crockett in a public hearing rather than handling this privately. Was that a political decision? Leavitt's response was measured but firm. When false allegations are made publicly, they sometimes require public correction. Representative Crockett had been presenting these forged documents in interviews for several days before the hearing. The American people deserved to know the truth without delay. Meanwhile, Crockett had canceled all public appearances and media interviews. Her office issued a brief statement saying she was cooperating fully with the FBI's investigation into the source of the forged documents. Behind the scenes, however, Democratic leadership was reportedly furious. Crockett had been seen as a rising star in the party, someone who could energize younger voters and communities of color. Now, her credibility had been severely damaged, and at the hands of Caroline Leavitt, herself a rising star in Republican politics. 3 days after the hearing, Crockett finally broke her silence in an interview with MSNBC. She attempted to shift the narrative, suggesting that she had been specifically targeted because of her effectiveness in holding the Trump administration accountable. "I made a mistake in not verifying those documents more thoroughly," she admitted. "But let's be clear about what happened here. Foreign actors targeted me because I've been effective in my oversight role. They wouldn't bother if I wasn't making an impact, but the damage control came too late." Video clips of Leavitt's devastating sentence. "Representative Crockett, the documents you're holding are actually fabricated intelligence created by your own staff and distributed by a foreign disinformation campaign," had been viewed hundreds of millions of times across social media platforms. Internet memes featuring Leavitt's calm expression juxtaposed with Crockett's shocked face had gone viral. Late-night comedians had incorporated the confrontation into their monologues. Even Saturday Night Live had produced a sketch recreating the moment, with the actress playing Leavitt delivering the now-famous line to thunderous applause. A week after the hearing, polling data showed a significant shift in public perception. Leavitt's approval rating had jumped 15 points, with even Democratic voters giving her high marks for professionalism and preparedness. Crockett's approval, meanwhile, had plummeted, with a majority of respondents saying they found her less credible than before. For Caroline Leavitt, the confrontation marked a turning point in her already impressive career. At just 27, she had established herself as not just a spokesperson, but a formidable political operator in her own right. Rumors began to circulate that she was being courted for a future congressional run, or perhaps even a role in Trump's campaign team for his 2028 re-election bid. For Jasmine Crockett, the path forward was less clear. While she maintained support from her core constituents, her national profile had been tarnished. Democratic leadership quietly removed her from prime committee assignments, and her media appearances became less frequent. The single sentence delivered by Caroline Leavitt in that congressional hearing had changed the trajectories of both women's careers. It had also served as a stark reminder of the dangers of foreign disinformation in American politics and the devastating consequences that can unfold when verification takes a backseat to political expediency. In Washington, where careers can be made or broken in an instant, Leavitt's calm dismantling of Crockett would be studied for years to come as a masterclass in political crisis management. One sentence, delivered at precisely the right moment, had altered the political landscape and cemented Leavitt's reputation as one of the most effective White House press secretaries in modern history. And it had all happened in less than 30 seconds in a congressional hearing that had begun as just another routine day on Capitol Hill. As the fallout from the confrontation continued to reverberate throughout Washington, the White House capitalized on Leavitt's newfound prominence. President Trump invited her to join him for several high-profile events, including a state dinner with the British Prime Minister and a televised town hall on national security. During the town hall, when asked about the Crockett incident, Trump was effusive in his praise for his young press secretary. "Caroline is simply the best," he told the audience. "She's smart, she's tough, and she doesn't back down. That's why I picked her." When she destroyed Crockett with that one sentence, that was a historic moment, folks. Historic. For her part, Leavitt maintained a professional demeanor in public, refusing to gloat about her victory over Crockett. In private White House meetings, however, sources reported that the president now gave her views even greater weight, often turning to her first when strategic communications decisions needed to be made. 2 weeks after the hearing, the Washington Post published an in-depth investigation that revealed more details about the foreign disinformation operation that had targeted Crockett. According to anonymous intelligence sources cited in the article, the campaign had been orchestrated by a sophisticated unit with ties to both Eastern European and Asian state actors. This wasn't just about fooling one congresswoman, an unnamed intelligence official told the Post. It was a test run for a much larger operation aimed at the 2026 midterm elections. Representative Crockett was chosen because of her profile and her known eagerness to find evidence against the administration. The article further revealed that similar forged documents had been sent to at least 6 other Democratic representatives, but their staffs had flagged inconsistencies and alerted the FBI before using the information publicly. Only Crockett had rushed to use the documents without thorough verification. This new information made Crockett's position even more precarious. Democratic leadership, initially supportive of their embattled colleague, began to distance themselves as it became clear that she had ignored standard verification protocols that other representatives had followed. House Minority Leader David Chen, in a carefully worded statement, said, "While we understand that Representative Crockett was herself a target of this operation, we expect all members of our caucus to adhere to the highest standards of fact-checking and verification, especially when making serious allegations against any administration." The subtle rebuke from her own party leadership was not lost on political observers or on Crockett herself. 3 weeks after the hearing, Crockett made her first public appearance at a community event in her district. Local supporters greeted her warmly, but national media coverage focused on the small group of protesters outside the venue holding signs that read, "Verify your facts," and "Disinformation damages democracy." During a brief press availability after the event, a reporter asked Crockett if she had spoken directly with Leavitt since the hearing. Crockett's response was terse. "No, I have not had any communication with Ms. Leavitt. I'm focused on serving my constituents, not on Washington drama." But the Washington drama showed no signs of subsiding. The video clip of Leavitt's devastating sentence had become one of the most viewed political moments of the year, with over 200 million views across various platforms. Political science. Professors were using it in their classes as a case study in congressional oversight gone wrong and crisis communications done right. Meanwhile, Caroline Leavitt's star continued to rise. Major magazines requested cover interviews, and her daily press briefings now consistently drew larger audiences than any of her predecessors. Network television shows competed for her to appear as a guest, though she declined most invitations, choosing instead to focus on her White House duties. A month after the hearing, Leavitt did agree to one in-depth interview with 60 Minutes, which had been scheduled before the confrontation with Crockett. During the interview, correspondent Scott Pelley inevitably brought up the now famous moment. "That sentence you delivered to Representative Crockett has been viewed hundreds of millions of times," Pelley noted. "Did you go into that hearing knowing you were going to confront her in that way?" Leavitt shook her head. "Not at all. I went to observe the hearing because we knew the committee was discussing issues relevant to the White House. I had no intention of speaking. But when Representative Crockett began presenting those forged documents as fact, and specifically mentioned my office, I felt I had a responsibility to correct the record immediately." "And how did you have that FBI report ready to present?" Pelley pressed. "The FBI had briefed the White House about the disinformation campaign that morning," Leavitt explained. "When I saw Representative Crockett with those exact documents, I texted our national security advisor, who confirmed they were the forgeries the FBI had identified. The president made the decision to declassify the FBI memo on the spot, and it was sent to my phone just before I requested to speak." The interview presented Leavitt as not just quick on her feet, but as someone with the trust and authority to act decisively in a high-pressure situation. Her approval ratings climbed even higher after the broadcast. 6 weeks after the hearing, the House Ethics Committee announced it was opening an investigation into whether Crockett or her staff had violated House rules by failing to properly vet the documents before presenting them in an official hearing. While the announcement stressed that being targeted by a disinformation campaign was not itself an ethics violation, the failure to follow verification protocols might be, especially given the serious nature of the allegations made against the President and the Department of Justice. The announcement dealt another blow to Crockett's already damaged reputation. Democratic strategists began privately discussing the need to recruit a primary challenger for her seat in the next election cycle, fearing that the ongoing controversy could make her vulnerable to a Republican challenger in what had previously been considered a safe Democratic district. 2 months after the hearing, a new development shifted the narrative slightly. The FBI arrested a mid-level staffer at a Washington think tank with ties to Crockett's office. The staffer was charged with acting as an unregistered foreign agent and with knowingly disseminating falsified government documents. According to the criminal complaint, the staffer had served as the conduit for delivering the forged documents to Crockett's office, presenting them as materials from a legitimate whistleblower. Crockett immediately held a press conference, presenting the arrest as vindication. "This confirms what I've said all along. I was the target of a sophisticated operation," she told reporters. "This individual deliberately misled my office, exploiting our trust and our commitment to oversight." However, the FBI complaint also noted that the staffer had provided the documents with several red flags that should have been caught during basic verification, including inconsistent formatting and timestamps that didn't align with known department activities. These details undercut Crockett's attempt to shift all blame to the foreign operation. The same day as the arrest, Caroline Leavitt was asked about the development during her daily press briefing. The White House commends the FBI for their diligent work in identifying those responsible for this disinformation campaign, she responded. "This arrest confirms the serious nature of foreign attempts to influence our democratic processes. It should serve as a reminder to all of us in public service of the importance of rigorous verification and the dangers of allowing partisan eagerness to cloud professional judgment." The measured response, which managed to acknowledge the arrest while still implicitly criticizing Crockett's lack of due diligence, was widely praised as another example of Leavitt's political acumen. 3 months after the hearing, the story had largely faded from daily headlines, but its impact continued to shape Washington dynamics. Caroline Leavitt had established herself as one of the most effective and respected press secretaries in recent memory, with even opposition media acknowledging her skill and preparedness. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, had been noticeably quieter in congressional hearings, more careful in her public statements, and less prominent in media appearances. The House Ethics Committee investigation was ongoing, with no resolution in sight, a cloud that continued to hang over her once promising career. The confrontation had also prompted changes in how congressional offices handled potential whistleblower information. Both parties had instituted stricter verification protocols, and the House Oversight Committee had established a new bipartisan verification team to assess sensitive documents before they could be presented in public hearings. Perhaps most significantly, the incident had demonstrated the evolving nature of foreign interference in American democracy. Rather than the social media campaigns and email hacks that had characterized previous efforts, this operation had shown a more sophisticated approach, targeting specific politicians with tailored disinformation designed to exploit their particular biases and ambitions. 6 months after the hearing, the Brookings Institution published a comprehensive report titled "The Crockett-Leavitt Incident: A New Frontier in Disinformation Warfare." The report detailed how the operation had been designed not just to spread false information, but to provoke exactly the kind of public confrontation that had occurred, thereby undermining faith in democratic institutions and increasing partisan divisions. The report concluded, "While much attention has focused on the political fallout for Representative Crockett and the career boost for Press Secretary Leavitt, the true significance of this incident lies in what it reveals about the evolving tactics of foreign actors seeking to undermine American democracy. The operation succeeded not just in fooling one congresswoman, but in creating a spectacle that further eroded public trust in government institutions and deepened partisan animosity. For all the analysis and political maneuvering, however, Most Americans remembered the incident for one thing only: that moment when a 27-year-old White House press secretary approached the microphone in a congressional hearing and, with one carefully crafted sentence, changed the course of multiple careers and exposed a foreign plot against American democracy. In political circles, it became known simply as the sentence. Political communications courses studied it, campaign strategists referenced it, and ambitious young staffers in Washington dreamed of having their own Leavitt moment, that perfect opportunity to demonstrate grace under pressure and to change the political narrative with just a few well-chosen words. A year after the hearing, when a major political magazine published its annual list of Washington's most influential under 40, Caroline Leavitt was ranked number 1. The accompanying photo showed her at the White House podium, poised and confident. The caption read, "One sentence was all it took." For Jasmine Crockett, the road to rehabilitation would be longer and more difficult. Though she managed to hold on to her seat in the next election, her national profile had been permanently diminished. The incident would be mentioned in the first paragraph of every profile written about her, a permanent asterisk on her political career. The confrontation between Leavitt and Crockett had lasted less than 5 minutes in a routine congressional hearing. But its repercussions would continue to echo through American politics for years to come, a reminder of how, in Washington, a single moment and a single sentence can sometimes change everything. 2 years after the infamous hearing, Washington, D.C. had evolved, but the sentence remained etched in political memory. Caroline Leavitt had transitioned from White House press secretary to a powerful role as senior advisor to President Trump, becoming one of his most trusted confidants at just 29 years old. The moment that had defined her career now featured in political textbooks nationwide. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett had managed to maintain her congressional seat, but remained haunted by the incident. The House Ethics Committee had eventually concluded its investigation with a formal reprimand, a relatively mild punishment, but a permanent mark on her record. She had deliberately kept a lower profile, focusing on local district work rather than national headlines. The broader implications of the confrontation continued to unfold across American politics. Congressional committees had implemented stringent new verification protocols for handling sensitive documents. The FBI had established a specialized congressional liaison unit, specifically tasked with helping representatives authenticate whistleblower materials. And journalism schools now taught the Crockett-Leavitt incident as a case study in the dangers of rushing to publication without thorough fact-checking. On the second anniversary of the hearing, The Atlantic published a comprehensive, retrospective article titled 5 Minutes That Changed Washington. The piece included new interviews with staffers who had been present in the hearing room, providing previously unreported details about what had transpired behind the scenes. According to one anonymous Democratic aide quoted in the article, "The moment. Leavitt stood up. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Several of us on Crockett's team immediately knew something was very wrong. The look on Leavitt's face, it wasn't smug or eager to attack. It was the calm confidence of someone holding all the cards." A Republican staffer described the immediate aftermath. When Chairman Wilson called the recess, the hallway outside exploded with activity. I saw senior Democratic leadership aides running toward Crockett's office. They knew instantly this was a 5-alarm fire. The article also revealed that in the moments after Leavitt's bombshell, Crockett's chief of staff had frantically searched through emails on his phone, discovering that the White House had indeed tried to contact them 3 times in the previous week about the forged documents. The emails had been flagged as potentially spam by their system and had never reached Crockett. It was the perfect storm of technological failure and human error, the chief of staff admitted in his first public comments on the incident. Those missed emails cost us dearly. The Atlantic piece also included the first public comment from Chairman Wilson since his retirement from Congress the previous year. "In 40 years of public service, I never witnessed a more dramatic moment on the committee floor." The precision of Leavitt's response suggested preparation, but the raw shock on everyone's faces, including my own, confirmed this was unfolding in real time. It was like watching a political car crash in slow motion. The article reignited public interest in the confrontation, with the video clip once again circulating widely on social media. New memes emerged, incorporating fresh cultural references but always centered on Leavitt's devastating sentence and Crockett's shocked reaction. 3 days after the Atlantic piece was published, Crockett finally agreed to her first in-depth interview about the incident on CNN's State of the Union. The Congresswoman appeared more subdued than in her fiery pre-incident days, but still maintained the direct communication style that had initially made her popular. "Yes, I made a serious mistake," she acknowledged when asked about the forged documents. "I failed to ensure proper verification, and I paid a steep price for that error. But I've spent the last 2 years working to regain the trust of my constituents and my colleagues." When the interviewer asked if she harbored any resentment toward Leavitt for the public nature of the confrontation, Crockett paused before responding. "I've had a lot of time to reflect on that day," she said carefully. "While I wish the White House had found a way to address this privately, I understand why Ms. Leavitt felt compelled to act as she did. The documents were being presented in a public hearing, so perhaps the correction needed to be public as well." This measured response, lacking the defensiveness that had characterized her initial reactions to the incident, earned Crockett positive reviews. Political analysts noted that this might be the beginning of a carefully orchestrated image rehabilitation campaign. The day after Crockett's interview, Caroline Leavitt was asked about the Congresswoman's comments during a press gaggle at the White House. "I appreciate Representative Crockett's reflections," Leavitt said. "What happened that day wasn't personal. It was about protecting the integrity of our governmental processes. I think we've all learned important lessons from the incident, and I'm glad to see that constructive changes have been implemented across Congress as a result." The exchange marked the closest thing to a public reconciliation between the two women since the confrontation. Behind the scenes, however, Washington insiders knew that the incident had fundamentally altered both women's trajectories in ways that continued to play out. Leavitt had been floated as a potential vice presidential candidate for the 2028 election, with her poised handling of the Crockett confrontation frequently cited as evidence of her readiness for higher office. Crockett, while maintaining her seat, had seen her national ambitions significantly curtailed. Before the incident, she had been mentioned as a possible future candidate for Senate or even a cabinet position in a Democratic administration. Now those speculations had largely disappeared from serious political discussion. 3 years after the hearing, a development occurred that brought the two women into direct contact for the first time since their famous confrontation. Both were invited to speak at the Harvard Kennedy School's Conference on Disinformation and Democracy. The event organizers had deliberately scheduled them on different days to avoid awkwardness, but a winter storm in Boston forced a last-minute rescheduling that put them on the same panel. The anticipation was palpable as they took their seats, on stage, separated by only the moderator. The auditorium was packed, with students and faculty eager to witness the interaction between the two women whose careers had become so intertwined by a single moment in congressional history. The moderator, a seasoned political journalist, addressed the elephant in the room immediately. "I think everyone here is aware of your shared history. Before we dive into the broader topic of disinformation, would either of you like to comment on how that experience has shaped your understanding of this issue?" Crockett, now in her second term in Congress, spoke first. "What happened that day was a masterclass in how disinformation works. I was so certain those documents were authentic. They confirmed what I already believed about the administration, which made me less rigorous in verifying them. That's exactly how sophisticated disinformation operates. It plays on our existing biases and makes us see what we expect to see." Leavitt nodded as Crockett spoke. When it was her turn, she added, "I agree with the Congresswoman's assessment. Disinformation is most dangerous when it tells us what we want to hear. That day taught me that none of us, regardless of position or party, is immune to being misled if we allow confirmation bias to override our critical thinking." The tension that many had expected between the two women never materialized. Instead, they engaged in a thoughtful discussion about the challenges of maintaining information integrity in a polarized political environment. By the end of the session, they were building on each other's points and even sharing a laugh over a comment from the audience. As they left the stage, cameras captured a brief moment when Leavitt extended her hand to Crockett, who took it and leaned in to exchange a few private words. Lip readers on social media later claimed that Crockett had said, "We both survived it," to which Leavitt had responded, "Some days better than others." The image of their handshake circulated widely, with many commentators noting the contrast between this moment of apparent reconciliation and the intense confrontation that had defined their relationship 3 years earlier. The following day, the New York Times ran an editorial titled "Leavitt, Crockett, and the Path Forward," which argued that their joint appearance represented a rare moment of growth in a political culture that typically rewards intransigence over reflection. In watching these two women discuss their shared experience with remarkable maturity and insight, the editorial board wrote, "We glimpsed what American political discourse could be if we valued truth over tribal victory." Both Leavitt and Crockett have emerged from their famous confrontation not as caricatures but as more complex public servants who have clearly reflected deeply on their roles in our democratic system. 4 years after the hearing, as the 2028 presidential campaign began to take shape, the political landscape had shifted dramatically. President Trump, having completed his second term, was now endorsing candidates rather than running himself. The Republican primary field included several prominent figures, including Caroline Leavitt, who had left the White House the previous year to prepare for a Senate run in her home state of New Hampshire. At 31, Leavitt would be the youngest senator in modern history if elected, a prospect that seemed increasingly likely given her national profile and fundraising prowess. Her campaign announcement video included a brief clip from the famous congressional confrontation, positioning it as evidence of her ability to stand firm under pressure. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, had gradually rebuilt her reputation through diligent committee work and local advocacy. While she remained in Congress, she had transformed her approach, becoming known for meticulous preparation and careful verification of facts before making public statements, a direct result of the lessons learned from the incident. In a surprising twist, when a major bipartisan bill on combating foreign disinformation came before Congress that year, Crockett and Leavitt, now a leading Senate candidate, both emerged as vocal supporters. The legislation, which established new protocols for authenticating sensitive information and created enhanced penalties for knowingly spreading foreign-generated disinformation, was informally dubbed the Crockett-Leavitt Act by Washington insiders. Though they were supporting the bill from different sides of the political spectrum, both women pointed to their personal experience as evidence of the need for such legislation. Their convergence on this issue generated significant media coverage, with many outlets noting the poetic justice of the two figures most associated with a famous disinformation incident, now leading the charge to prevent similar occurrences. 5 years after the hearing, a comprehensive FBI report on foreign interference in American democracy was declassified and made public. The report included a detailed section on the operation that had targeted Crockett, revealing that it had been even more sophisticated than initially understood. According to the report, the operation had been designed with multiple contingencies. If Crockett had not presented the documents publicly, other forged materials were prepared for different congressional offices. The operators had studied the communication patterns, staffing structures, and verification protocols of various representatives to identify the most promising targets. Most strikingly, the report confirmed that the operation had anticipated the possibility of the forgeries being exposed and had prepared for that contingency as well. The dramatic public confrontation between Leavitt and Crockett had actually served the operators' broader goal of undermining trust in democratic institutions and inflaming partisan tensions. In this sense, the report concluded, even the exposure of the operation contributed to its success, as it generated precisely the kind of spectacle that deepened existing divisions and reinforced partisan narratives about the untrustworthiness of political opponents. This revelation added a layer of complexity to the legacy of the Crockett-Leavitt confrontation. What had been viewed primarily as a career-defining moment for both women, devastating for one, elevating for the other, was now also understood as a successful outcome for the foreign actors who had orchestrated the operation. 10 years after the hearing, as Caroline Leavitt was being sworn in as the junior senator from New Hampshire, and Jasmine Crockett was announcing her retirement from Congress after 5 terms, A documentary filmmaker brought the two women together for a joint interview, reflecting on the incident that had so profoundly shaped both their careers. Sitting across from each other in a neutral studio setting, both now more seasoned and reflective than they had been a decade earlier, they watched the famous clip together. Perhaps the 1,000th time each had seen it, but the first time they had viewed it in each other's presence. As the clip ended with Crockett's shocked expression frozen on screen, the filmmaker asked, "If you could go back to that day, would you do anything differently?" Crockett smiled ruefully. "Besides the obvious, verifying those documents properly, I think I would have handled the aftermath better. I was defensive, trying to shift blame instead of simply acknowledging my mistake and learning from it. That prolonged the damage to my reputation." Leavitt nodded. "I've often wondered if there was a way I could have corrected the record without creating such a public spectacle." The White House had tried to reach Representative Crockett's office privately, but when that failed and she presented those documents in a hearing, I felt I had no choice but to act immediately. Still, I never anticipated how that moment would define both our careers for years to come. The filmmaker then asked, "Do you think your confrontation had any lasting impact on American politics beyond your personal careers?" Both women considered the question carefully. "I think it changed how Congress handles information," Crockett offered. "The verification protocols established after our incident have prevented several similar operations from succeeding. That's something positive that came from my very public mistake." Leavitt added, "It also demonstrated the evolving nature of foreign interference. Before our confrontation, most people thought of disinformation as fake social media accounts or hacked emails. Our incident showed how much more sophisticated these operations had become, targeting specific officials with tailored false information designed to exploit their particular biases." As the interview concluded, the filmmaker asked if either had any regrets about how the incident had shaped their careers. Crockett thought for a moment. "I regret the mistake, certainly, but I don't regret the lessons it taught me. I became a more careful, more thorough representative because of it. And while it definitely limited some of my national ambitions, it also kept me focused on serving my district, which is what really matters." Leavitt's response was equally measured. "That moment opened doors for me, without question, but it also created expectations that were sometimes difficult to live up to. For years, people expected me to deliver another dramatic moment like that one. I had to work hard to show that I was more than just that one sentence, that I had substance and skills beyond crisis management." As they parted ways after the interview, cameras captured them sharing a genuine laugh. Two women who had once been adversaries in one of the most dramatic moments in recent political history, now able to see that moment as just one chapter in their long and complex careers. The documentary, when it aired, was titled simply "The Sentence, 10 Years Later." It became required viewing in political science classes across the country, not just for its insights into the famous confrontation, but for what it revealed about resilience, growth, and the unpredictable nature of political life. The Crockett-Leavitt incident had long since transcended its origins as a congressional confrontation to become a cultural touchstone, a shorthand for how a single moment can define careers, expose vulnerabilities in democratic systems, and reveal the complex interplay between individual actions and larger geopolitical forces. And at the center of it all remained those few seconds of footage. A young press secretary approaching a microphone, delivering one perfectly crafted sentence, and changing the course of American political history in ways that no one, not even she, could have anticipated.